Hello and welcome to Ukrainian Flames, a special project brought to you by Ukraine Crisis Media Center, Ukraine Catholic University's Analytical Center, and NGO Euro-Atlantic Course. My name is Alexandra Tsekhanovska. I'm the head of Hybrid Warfare Analytical Group at Ukraine Crisis Media Center, introducing the topic of today's episode, which is Russian military machine possible without Vladimir Putin? If you want to know, please subscribe to our channel to stay tuned. If by some miracle we all wake up tomorrow and realize that for whatever reason Vladimir Putin is no longer the president of the Russian Federation, does it mean that the war is over? With many mistakenly saying that this war is Putin's war, essentially his personal responsibility, different and rather complicated questions arise. For example, if Putin is not there, how do we negotiate a peace treaty? Is there someone to negotiate with? Will Russia agree to adhere to the international law fully and unconditionally and withdraw its troops from all the territory of Ukraine, including Crimea and Donbas region? Will a new president, perhaps he is a bright young liberal, recognize the mistakes of his predecessor and decide that Russia has to live in peace with Ukraine? What exactly does that peace look like? And what is exactly the reason why it has never really been achieved before? Sadly, we are not very optimistic when trying to answer those questions. As Ukrainian experts have argued on many accounts, the problem is much deeper than Putin's leadership itself. Long-standing colonial perception of Ukraine combined with the years of dehumanizing Russian propaganda, which, by the way, was still not the only source of information available to Russians, have made Russian society deeply aggressive towards Ukraine. Let's take a closer look with Vitaly Rybak, a chief analyst at Internews Ukraine.
The problem is that the Kremlin propaganda has operated for years and has led to irreversible shifts in Russian society. So today, many Russians believe that Russia is an empire to be, that Russia is in direct confrontation with the West, and they have been led to believe that international relations are the zero-sum game, that international relations are realpolitik, where only one side can win and other side can lose. Therefore, any outcome in which Russia does not win this war directly means that Russia loses. And this is indeed a huge problem because it does not give us an opportunity to end this war somehow on terms which would be acceptable for both sides. Because also we see that, according to polls, most Russians support Putin's actions and most Russians support the war. But the question is, of course, do we trust in polls in Russia? Can we trust even in those polls which are held by independent pollsters such as Levada Group and others? So I would say no, but partly yes, because even though the numbers might not be exact, so there may be a huge error margin, still I would say that the majority of Russians support this war, even if they do not accept it, because do we see large-scale protests in Russia? There were some at the very beginning of the war, but now almost no such protests take place. And, well, the problem is that, of course, from the one side we have a totalitarian crackdown, but from the other side we have a lot of people in Russia, ordinary Russians, who simply don't care. And in these situations where the war is going on, if you don't care, you support this war. So sadly, that's it. So only those Russians who are actively against the war can be considered those who do not support this war. This is sad reality. And also another problem is that Kremlin itself does polls. We've seen this from reports from Meduza, a Russian opposition media. So Meduza wrote with links to its own sources in administration of Putin that the administration was conducting its own polls, so a closed sociology, which has shown that the majority of Russians support the war, and so especially those Russians who are well off, who do not feel the effects of sanctions yet, and who won't feel these effects for some time. And so Putin's team pays close attention to these polls, and they see as a really big problem that there is no way out for Putin in which he would not be seen as a loser. So Russian elites, if they can be called this way, simply have chosen to continue this war because there is no way to lose, even though they do not think that defeat might be even more bitter and difficult to hide in the end. So I believe that after Ukraine's victory, a deputinization of Russia is needed, a kind of deputinization akin to denazification which took place in Nazi Germany, because it would definitely take years to cleanse Russian society from the effects of Putin's propaganda, which has been in place for all these years.
Having reiterated the profound influence of Russian propaganda, I can only agree with Vitaly's point that in order to truly establish working relations between Russia and Ukraine, Russian society will absolutely need to reinvent itself in a way. And that reinvention is only possible after profound repentance, fitting the war crimes committed against Ukrainian people. Anatoly Shara, a big data analyst and a freelance journalist, emphasizes once more that what actually unfolded in the occupied territories was not a coincidence, and how it was not Putin personally who committed all those atrocities.
Hello everyone, my name is Anatoly Shara and I'm just an ordinary Ukrainian citizen. In this video I want to tell you some words about so-called ordinary Russians. I think that European Bucha, Hostomel are the places where the Russians committed war crimes, and I'm sure that the pictures of people shot just on the sidewalks, shot in the back in the head, or mass graves in Bucha, Irpin and Gostomel traveled worldwide. There is no serious reason to explain why the Russian armed forces have to change their name to the army of orcs, to a thoughtful listener. It's not about their dirty and homeless appearances, but the gravity of crimes they committed, resembling very closely ugly creatures from Tolkien's novels. A lot of people in Europe believe that it's Putin who's to blame for the unfolding war in Ukraine, not the ordinary Russians, so the sanctions should be lifted. Allegedly, the common people are not guilty. But Bucha, Irpin, Hostomel, Trostyanets, Ochtyrka, it was not Putin himself who executed hundreds of the people there. The ordinary Russians killed all those innocent people. These ordinary people voted for him and created him. These so-called ordinary people are happy to kill the Ukrainians because there is an asphalt road in every village, modern cars, smart houses, up-to-date devices, good food, fashionable restaurants and supermarkets. All of the above are absent in the regions these orcs live. They are just jealous and mad about that. That's the reason they rob the houses of Ukrainians. They are very poor, and this poorness reigns inside of these ordinary Russians.
Having established that extreme Russian violence against the Ukrainian people is a product of deep destructive processes within Russian society itself, rather than a personal responsibility of Vladimir Putin, we also need to ask ourselves, is such kind of policy unique? And I think we all know the answer, which is sadly no. Yarema Duch, a political advisor and communications expert, walks us through the brief history of sickness lying at the core of Russian expansionist policies, and also talks about what our answer should be.
It's not a coincidence in Russian history. When we speak about Russian invasion to Ukraine, it's not something that happened out of the blue. In my opinion, it's a deliberate policy of Russians since the 17th century to conquer and enslave everybody who lives on the neighboring territories. And this continuation is just a normal way of events for the Russian people, unfortunately. And as for Vladimir Putin, he is not the reason that the Russian war machine is now trying to conquer Ukraine. Vladimir Putin is rather a product of this war machine, because let me remind you, he was born and raised in the Soviet Union, and one of his most prominent quotes makes him sorry that the Soviet Union was collapsed. And since then, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, Vladimir Putin is trying to restore it. And as of now, we do not see that this is one evil leader who enslaved the entire population. It is wrong to assume that, because it's not Vladimir Putin who made all the atrocities in Bucha, in Borodyanka, in Mariupol, in many more Ukrainian cities and towns. That's, as they say, common Russian people who were ready to serve their country for some kind of seek greater good, as they portray it. It's not Vladimir Putin the reason that Russia invaded Ukraine. He is one of the products of the Russian war machine that started operating centuries ago. So it's not change of Vladimir Putin that will stop Russian of invading their neighbors. That is deliberate isolation policy of the Russian state that will help to ensure and protect that won't happen again. So when it comes to those who we are calling Russian liberals, that's also a tricky question whether we can count on them, because we have this saying in Ukraine that Russian liberal stop being Russian liberal when he is being asked about Ukraine. And unfortunately, if in 20 years of Putin's regime they weren't capable of developing any alternative that will be supported by vast majority of Russians, so first that tells us that they are ineffective, and second, it tells us maybe they are not what the Russian people is seeking for. I mean, it's hard to say that we were tricked by Russian propaganda in year 2022, because there are a lot of means of communications and of media outlets that you can get the information from. For instance, Russian service of BBC, Russian service of Voice of America, Russian service of Deutsche Welle, they are out there for decades. So you cannot tell that Russian people were tricked by the Russian government, because at least for some time they have all these means and they can have the alternative version of what is happening in their home country and abroad. So when we speak about Russian war machine, for me the only thing the world should do is to isolate Russia and help their neighbors protect themselves and protect the neighboring countries which stand after them. Because if we won't stop Russia in Ukraine, they won't stop in Ukraine. They will go further. That will be only the matter of time. So when we arm and support Ukraine, we also help all the other neighboring countries that had this sad fate to border Russia. So when we want to have a peace, at least in Europe, we need to stop Russia, isolate Russia, and unfortunately there is no Russian leader available right now in the society that could be a good replacement of Vladimir Putin. I think we still wait for the leader that will be different from what Russia produced for last hundreds of years. But until we wait that Russian society will grow up and do their homework, we need to stop Russian war machine, we need to isolate them, and we need to help not only Ukraine but all the neighboring countries who want this help. Because if we won't stop Russia, we will have the next world war in the coming days. I think we seeing this right now, and I think that if we want really all the atrocities that would never happen again, we need to act now, and we need to act firm.
The skepticism towards Russian liberal politicians should be taken seriously. Check issue 43 of Ukrainian Flames, which is specifically dedicated to this topic. But before you do, also listen to our next guest, Nina Kuriada, who expresses justified concern for the Russian liberal politicians as a potential answer to stopping the war machine currently destroying Ukraine.
Some people and some media still describe Russians and Ukrainians as practically the same nation. They speak of brother nations, speaking similar languages and sharing so-called common history. In this artificial world with Kremlin narratives, it can seem that there are two nations, very close and friendly, with only one person standing between them, Vladimir Putin. Everything that's happened in Ukraine since the 24th of February is called Putin's war. It is not just Putin who orders the Russian army to shell Ukrainian cities and villages. It's not because of just him and his inner circle that Russian soldiers made all that massacre in Bucha and Mariupol. It's not Putin who shot civilians trying to flee Irpin near Kyiv. There are hundreds of Russian soldiers killing civilians, raping Ukrainian women and children, and many more Russian citizens who support it. 65% of Russians support their special military operation, as they call this war in Russia. During the first week of the war, public support for Putin in Russia grew from 60 to 71%. As we can see in some vox pops in different Russian cities, most ordinary Russians approve what their soldiers do in Ukraine. I couldn't understand this until I saw a news bulletin on the liberal Russian TV that has been closed already. It shows that the vast majority of people in cities across the whole Russia consider this special operation, as they say, an appropriate step to strengthen the peace. One old woman said she was ready to send her son to Ukraine because otherwise, she said, the Hohols, which is the humiliating name for Ukrainians used in Russia, would come and kill us here, she said. The war started in 2014 when Russia annexed the Crimea and invaded Donbas. So, if all these people, so-called Russian liberals, were against the war, where were they during last 8 years? They were saying that Crimea is Russian, or that the Crimea is not a sandwich to be passed forth and back, like Alexei Navalny said. They were doing propaganda TV with a lot of hate speech against Ukraine and Ukrainian nation, like Marina Ovsyannikova did. And now I want to say something to so-called Russian liberals. Now it is not enough to say no war. It is worth asking yourselves, what was I doing for these 8 years? What can I do to stop the war? Why didn't I do anything earlier? And if you have nothing to say, if you think that Crimea is still Russian, and this war has any rational reason to start, it means that you are not the Russian liberal, but the Russian imperialist. And you are also responsible for this war. You support this war against Ukraine, and this is not just Putin's war, but yours.
You've been watching the special project by Ukraine Crisis Media Center, Ukraine Catholic University's Analytical Center, and NGO Euro-Atlantic course, Ukrainian Flames. If you find our work useful, please like and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay tuned. In the description to this episode, as well as to any other episode, you will find information on how you personally can help Ukraine in the face of Russian aggression. Don't stand by, and remember that everything is going to be Ukraine.